Welcome to this random assortment of fun facts and nuggets of maybe helpful information. One fact per Final Fantasy XIV combat job. And if you remember a random fun fact about a job of your own, be sure to let me know in the comments. 1. Ninja. Dream Within a Dream is the only non-limited combat job action that actually hits multiple times. Due to things like damage variance, direct hit, and crits, this means Dream Within a Dream, which can roll all these things individually on each hit, has a much more reliable average damage than many other attacks. The reason for this is pretty simple. If you have 25% chance to critically hit, then on average, you would crit 25 attacks out of 100. This doesn't always happen in practice because random do be like that. Similarly, you would crit 1 in 4 hits, or 100 out of 400. The more attempts you add to the test, the closer your actual result should align with the average. As such, an attack that always delivers 3 attempts will land much closer to the actual average result. 2. Paladin. Quite a while ago, shield block rates and strengths were normalized. In fact, as long as you're equipped with an appropriate level shield, your block chance and power should always be the same 30% chance to block 20% damage. Right? Well, sometimes scaling works weird. For instance, if you were to enter, Tower of Babel, the level 83 dungeon, synced, then your block strength actually only amounts to 19% damage reduction. Can't really speak on the chance, I didn't test long enough on that one. However, this can sometimes make the true value of blocking for Paladin slightly unpredictable in content that doesn't place the Paladin at a clean level 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, or indeed 100. This kind of discrepancy was particularly significant at the start of Dawntrail, as an oversight meant that Dawntrail shields did not have more block rate and strength than Endwalker shields, leading to Paladins going below 30% and 20% at level 100, or even level 91. This has since been fixed, so don't worry. 3. Dragoon. Before Endwalker added a proper payoff to Raiden Thrust with the addition of Whirlwind Thrust, Raiden Thrust worked a bit differently. Remember, before Dawntrail, Fang and Claw would enable Wheeling Thrust as a stronger Step 5 option, and Wheeling Thrust would enable Fang and Claw as a stronger Step 5 option, after they were respectively used as a Step 4. They both have positionals, and Raiden Thrust would only be enabled if both of those positionals were done correctly, as some sort of additional reward. Imagine if this was still the case while Whirlwind Thrust existed. Quite a huge loss to miss one single positional then, huh? 4. Sage. Pepsis is an ability that allows the Sage to turn their Yevcration diagnosis and prognosis barriers into more healing. However, it isn't a 1-to-1 conversion or something like that. Rather, they turn into 450 and 350 cure potencies. What is really interesting here is that once enhanced healing magic is learned at level 85, the shield from Yevcration Diagnosis is actually always bigger than the potential healing Pepsis could provide. At level 96, where Yevcration Prognosis gets upgraded to, Yevcration Prognosis 2, and the barrier goes up to 360%, it also consistently beats over Pepsis. This is further compounded by the fact that these barriers are applied by spells, meaning they could benefit from effects that increase healing magic potency, like Philosophia, where Pepsis cannot, meaning this ability only really adds value at these levels when you need healing and barriers won't help, or if you use the weird interaction that if Pepsis is activated just right, you can spend the barrier on Pepsis while the barrier still blocks damage. Although, be careful, you might not get that result consistently. 5. Red Mage. As we know, the Thunder and the Arrow each have a 50% chance to enable the Fire and the Stone respectively. Before Shadowbringers, Jolt had a 100% chance to enable using Impact, and Impact was a fast single-target spell just as strong as the Fire and the Stone, and simply meant that each time you used Jolt, you would always get at least one good fast spell. 6. Machinist. Before Shadowbringers, Wildfire was effectively a very roundabout, single-target, shorter, fight or flight, causing the target to accumulate 25% of all damage done by you for 10 seconds, on only a minute cooldown. This of course meant that machinists benefited from using their Gauss rounds and ricochets and whatnot during this 10-second window every minute. Notably, machinists got a whole rework in Shadowbringers, so things like hypercharge windows as we know them were not a thing at the time. 7. Samurai. Initially, Shoha worked very differently. This only lasted until the first major patch of Shadowbringers though. It could only be used to end meditate, and for every 3 seconds of charging, a stack would accumulate and the damage of Shoha, which was single target by the way, would be based on the number of stacks. Now, that already sounds really hard to make work, since it is melee range, so you would need to start meditating next to where the boss would land after being away, and optimally, you would also need to coordinate so the boss comes back right around as 15 seconds have passed. So surely the payoff would be earth-shattering, right? Not exactly. It was more like 500 potency. At a time where Midare Setsugeka could do 1200 potency. It was reworked pretty much to the way it works now, although it was only single target at that point, by 5.1. 8. Dark Knight. As all tanks have an innate, unexplained 20% reduced damage output, but pets don't. 100 potency for the Living Shadow is worth more than 100 potency for the Dark Knight itself. Or, in other words, even though the Living Shadow's Shadowbringer has less potency than the Dark Knight's own, the Living Shadow will do more damage with theirs. A little bonus fun fact here is that Dark Knight's Carbon Spit, which also appears to and is explained as hitting 3 times, is only 1 big hit of damage, which it does explain, despite being released at the same time as Ninja's Dream Within a Dream. 9. White Mage. Assize is an ability that does 300 potency of damage and healing in a large radius around the White Mage. It also recovers 10% of the user's MP and has a 90-second cooldown. Well, it at least used to have all that back in Heavensward. Obviously, all of these things have been changed over time, but the cooldown is the particular thing that was changed in several steps. 60 seconds, then 45, and then 40 in Endwalker. 10. Summoner. There's just something about Garuda and being unlucky for some reason. Before the rights are learned, Emerald Ruin tends to fall behind regular Ruin if you have a certain amount of spell speed. Additionally, specifically at level 45 to 49, Garuda does only a measly 100 potency, although in an AoE, making it significantly weaker than the other 2 summons on single target or even just a low target count. Furthermore, in Endwalker, the opener leading with Garuda was very specific on the requirements for it to actually be better than Titan first. And in Stormblood, using Garuda as your primary summon depended on your group composition being a specific way, typically meaning that Ifrit just ended up being preferred because it was quote-unquote slightly easier. Garuda just keeps catching strays. 11. Viper. With only Serpent's Ire, Vicewinder and its shared cooldown with Vice Pit, and of course Slither, Viper has the lowest total count of non-roll action cooldowns, counting only 3. Assuming the cooldowns that go hand in hand with another cooldown don't count, Summoner comes in second with 4. Demi-Summon, Energy Drain, Radiant Aegis, Searing Light. Viper additionally also shares a first place on least amount of buttons, including roll actions. 12. Bard. Repertoire is a mechanic that has changed quite a lot how it worked over the years. If we focus on the effect of Mage's Ballad for a moment, this started as a trait called River of Blood, which gave critical dot ticks from the Bard a chance to reset the cooldown of Bloodletter. In Stormblood, with the rework of the songs, this was instead made the effect of Mage's Ballad, or more precisely, during Mage's Ballad, the effect known as Repertoire was that critical dot ticks always reset Bloodletter. In Shadowbringers, this was then changed to a fixed chance on every tick of the dots, and with Endwalker, this was changed to a chance to happen every 3 seconds of the song playing, which is how it works now. What a journey. A somewhat rare misconception is that the change in Shadowbringers was implemented allegedly because dots lost the ability to crit tick. This is not true, and dots can both crit tick and direct tick, and even direct crit tick. They just lack the visual flourish that normal attacks have when these things happen. 13. Gunbreaker. Originally, the Gnashing Fang combo were 3 separate buttons. Continuation was still just 1 button though. Bonus fun fact, Bloodfest still only shows 2 cartridges on its icon despite giving 3 cartridges. Just spreading the gospel, now you know too. 14. Scholar. When initially revealed with the coming of Endwalker, Expedient was by far the least well received of the big healer cooldowns shown. This could partly be because it wasn't entirely clear what it did, or because a raid-wide sprint is difficult to evaluate put up against 3 cooldowns that straight up heals in one way or another. In practice though, only Expedient among these 4 was ever nerfed. In particular, the Expedient sprint initially was 20 seconds. 15. Pictomancer. With the combination of Star Prism, Retribution of the Madine, and a Living Muse, Pictomancer takes the cake for the most potency delivered in the time frame of a single global cooldown at a whopping 3,900. And that's before any passive or active damage bonuses being layered on top. It still doesn't quite win for most damage on a single hit, thanks to what Ninja can do with Hyoshoranryu though. 16. Monk. From level 84 onward, Forbidden Chakra does 400 potency per use. However, before that, Forbidden Chakra is only 310 potency. This is relevant because when 6-sided Star is learned at level 80, it spends all chakra, converting them into 80 potency each, meaning 5 chakra becomes 400 potency. This leads to a rather strange level 80 optimization in bursts of using 6-sided Star to get extra value out of your chakra, on top of sneaking more potency into the tail end of your buffs. 17. Astrologian. For a single target, Astrologian has the most damage reduction options among all healers. Exaltation 10%, the Bowl 10%, then including AoE options on top, Collective Unconscious 10%, and Sun Sign 10%. This is extra apparent considering the other healers tend to have at most 2 options that stack with each other. 18. Black Mage. Despite how flashy and explosive Black Mage's rotation appears, High Thunder is its 2nd strongest spell in terms of raw potency. Hop to AoE and High Thunder 2 is actually its strongest spell. Obviously, both of these things are only true if the full dot manages to tick through. 19. Warrior. Originally, Nascent Flash healed based on a percentage of damage dealt. Lifesteal, you could say. Notably, these kinds of effects are usually unaffected by healing increasing effects because they are technically percentage effects. I have a separate video where I talk about this thing in slightly more detail. With Endwalker, Nascent Flash was changed to work the way it does now, and Raw Intuition was changed to match it alongside Bloodwetting getting added. However, it wasn't until 7.1 of Dawntrail that it was addressed that neither of these effects benefited from healing increasing effects, or at the very least was unaffected by the increase from Thrill of Battle. It is very likely this bug was caused by a carryover from the times when Nascent Flash was based on damage done. 20. Reaper. Soul Slice has always said in the tooltip that the recast timer cannot be affected by status effects or gear attributes. However, it wasn't until Dawntrail before a rather funny oversight was fixed. While below level 78, where Soul Slice does not have 2 charges, it actually was affected by skill speed, reducing its cooldown. Strangely, by comparison, Machinist's Drill still works this way. Scales cooldown with skill speed, stops when it unlocks 2 charges. 21. Dancer. This might actually be a helpful tip, yet also a fun fact. But Standard Finish actually applies 2 quote-unquote functionally different buffs to you and your partner. The Dancer gets a giver buff and the partner gets a receiver buff. Even though they're visually identical, this means 2 dancers can partner each other and double up on standard finish buffs, which will work. Now, Devilment will not stack, and 2 technical finishes also will not stack, so 2 dancers in a party is still very inefficient, and 2 dancers partnering each other is also not entirely optimal. But it is an option. 22. Blue Mage. Off-guard used to work quite differently. Originally, it made you do 50% more damage to the target, and it lasted 30 seconds with a 25-second cooldown, with its cooldown automatically resetting when you kill the target. In other words, you had to kind of commit to your target. When Off-Guard was reworked to the way it works now, most, if not all, Blue Mage attacks got a massive damage buff. GCDs that have a potency of 200 now used to have a potency closer to like 120. GCDs that have a potency of 220 now used to be closer to 130. Understandably, this was overhauled because Off-Guard originally was effectively a must-take action, and also was pretty much mandatory to maintain on your target at all times. Not that Blue Mage has a huge amount of variety in its rotation and choices, locking in one action like this would be a lot more limiting. Let's quietly ignore actions like Etheric Mimicry that are effectively also must-takes. So, did you know all of these fun facts? Did you find any of them particularly interesting? Do you know some fun facts of your own? I would love to hear about them in the comments. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Ko-Fi, link in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Meta fun fact: I've included a fun fact at the end of nearly every single video on this channel. But the first video that had a fun fact was actually not the first video on the channel, rather it was the second, which was a video explaining most aspects of movement in Final Fantasy XIV, including things like the fact that Ninja's passive makes them run 10% faster, but speed bonuses don't stack on top of each other, so a ninja sprinting is just as fast as any other job sprinting.